Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Nëïgsëndöïg Cöcülës show. My name is Nëïgsëndöïg, the namesake for this here podcast. Quick disclaimer before we get started for today's episode. I did use Grok in part, but I read the articles it provided on computer part price spikes that have been happening as of late. I have a theory for this at the end of this episode. But I am pulling a Jack Spirko here, but with Grok instead of ChatGPT. Grok is more ethical than what OpenAI are doing, especially since a whistleblower seemingly self-deleted himself. I don't believe that, and a lot of people don't believe that. Anyway, Grok ended up pulling from 35 separate sources, so it is recommended that you take a look from all of them. I do have the Grok chat that I personally used linked below. Now, we will be focusing upon 6 of these. The reason for this is, as I said, computer parts are rising in prices big time. One reason has to do with tariffs. The other reason has to do with AI, though I am specifically focusing on the tariffs. This is somewhat political, though I am going to make it as corporate-friendly as possible. Think of this as a corporate-friendly version of the Survival Podcast, which is raw in what Spirko does. Now, I've mentioned Spirko a couple times on the podcast before. I get most of the stuff that I do from him. Now, let's define first what a tariff is. It is a tax issued by a government on imports or exports of some sort of product to and or from another country. Now, here in America, Congress has to approve any tariffs. However, the EOs from the current presidential administration are said to be under constitutional questioning because these EOs actually issue tariffs directly, and this was not the design of an executive order. Now, let's go into the first article, which, by the way, all of this will be linked below. This first one is by Cöcülës. I butchered it. From January 27th of 2025, so about a year ago by now. Article is Trump tariffs could raise prices on technology like laptops, smartphones, and AI. Now, we do have some shenanigans. In the article, it was mentioned that in Guadalajara, in Mexico, NVIDIA had said that Foxconn was building a factory over there for the purpose of building AI servers. The goal here is to house GB200 NVL72 GPUs. Those things are absolutely massive. Like, what the heck is the size of that? If I do remember to put it in post on the video side of things on YouTube, this is what one of these looks like. Taken straight from a Reddit post, I will go ahead and link below. It's insane. Now, the looks here, this was stopped since the tariff changes were implemented, with prices rising from $86 billion in 2019 to 103 billion with a B in 2023 for that time. Companies like Hisense, Lenovo, and others are attempting to build factories outside of China to avoid the tariffs by making things there. A made in the USA type deal, which probably will not work as of right now because I don't think it will ever work. China, even about a year later, is still the biggest source of electronic imports, and yet they have to pay a lot for doing this. Now, part of this too, actually, now that I think about it, will come from Operation Stargate, which I think seems to be failing, but it might not be. I'm hopeful. There's another CNBC article on it, which I will not be covering here, in regards to Operation Stargate. Warnings were issued over the tariff debacle, and it could make it slow for commerce. And now there are people that are also saying that a tariff is a tax passed to Americans and or others due to import or export taxes that are levied to the importer or exporter, not the people themselves. But apparently the people have to pay for it because of the inflated prices. There was a 60% tariff on Chinese goods in some sectors, which would be a huge blow to normal American people. But there would be 10% tariffs across the board for Canada and Mexico. There was mitigation considered, but it's prohibitively expensive from the looks of things. That's just not a good idea. But from the looks of things, the whole Chinese tariff thing, I think it's still going on. This is basically a trade war. Some people will call it a trade war. Let's go on to the second article by Julian Chokatu of Wired with the headline, Tariffs will make electronics more expensive. If you need a new gadget, buy it now. This is from April 8th of 2025. There are sweeping tariffs that were announced by the administration on April 2nd. Some people call this Liberation Day, specifically on foreign goods imported to the US. There were people that said that it would stoke a trade war and cause fears of a recession to creep up big time. Well, why do you think people are talking about an AI bubble? Mark Moss has a video on why AI is not a bubble, but rather the US dollar and the bonds thereof. I will have that linked below. Anyway, there was a 10% tariff implemented for 90 days, with an exception to China. April 12th would see certain electronics exempted due to semiconductor tariff in place, which was 20% at the time. Since the company would have to pay for the imports, they tend to raise prices due to their bottom line being affected. Those would be their profits. That's why some people say tariffs are a secret tax on the people, other than inflation. There was a 104% tariff that went into effect on April 9th of 2025, though this would bump laptop tariffs to 145%. That is disgusting. 95% of this tariff would be absorbed by the importer, though. Not so much the consumer themselves, maybe a slightly higher price. What I'm saying is here, this seems to be inflating things due to the US dollar losing value still. We lose our purchasing power every time we hold US dollars. And every single country was affected by this. Electronics manufacturing countries were actually not too bad, considering the MSU supply chain professor Jason Miller talking about this. Things he just rattled off are furniture, shoes and apparel, microwave ovens, silverware and plates, blinds, linens and curtains, toys, solar panels, building materials, cashews, candles, fans, air conditioning parts, golf clubs, exercise equipment, keyboards, automotive parts, Christmas ornaments and home decor, that I would call for tariffs on, toilets, food blenders, and seafood. Certain seafood, I would call for it to be tariffed. Now, Miller said to expect less variety of products due to the tariffs. 70 companies were reached out to by Wired, but a bunch of them did not make a comment. At the time, they probably could have been figuring stuff out, or I guess this had to do with like very confidential stuff. A home office furniture brand named Branch was preparing for the changes, finding ways to tank the tariffs, with little increase to the prices. A drip coffee maker called Mocha Master may have to absorb some short-term pressure at the US level, though at the time it was too early to tell. Next, we have a Portland, Oregon-based coffee machine maker called Ratio. They said that the import dues this high could have potentially shoved prices higher down our throats. This affects small businesses too, which were already struggling. Maybe Ratio should be using the Jack Spirko method. Anyway, there is a photo equipment manufacturer called Moment who said that prices would have to increase by 10 or down to like $5 in preparation for this. A digital notebook manufacturer named Supernote said on Reddit they were increasing the prices due to the tariffs. LifePhone said they were not going to do that on the flagship model, the LifePhone 3, though this was paused as this was being moved outside of China. OnePlus said they would not comment, though the Watch 3 was $500 due to the tariffs. Shein, a clothing retailer, had to adjust their prices due to global trade rule changes, which In their words, I just had to mangle them. There was also a lot of other nonsense regarding this thing as well. So that's something to keep in mind too. The third article for today is by three people. This is from the BBC. Michael Race, Emma Haslett, and Natalie Sherman, writing 6 things that may cost Americans more after tariffs. Now, this one is pretty short, but we do have the items of coffee, olive oil, and some others. Brazil has 50% tariffs at this time. Vietnam had 20% tariffs at this time. And EU olive oil was at 15%. This is August of 2025. Alcohol. Yes, alcohol was tariffed. Automobiles. So this one's interesting. From the study that was done, there was a 25% levy on passenger vehicles to protect American companies, though this would be reduced by 10% to 15%. Now, housing? What the flip is housing all about here? Well, there was a 50% increase on copper, and there's the National Association for Home Builders, which said that it would increase the cost of building houses. 69% of lumber that was bought, 25% of imported iron and steel, and 18% of copper was tariffed out the wazoo. Energy and fuel. Well, that's actually due to data centers. And I was pretty shocked as to why they were trying to do this. I couldn't even understand squat. Anyway, let's go to the fourth article today, which is by Megan Cerullo of CBS, with the headline, 4 Reasons Why the Tariffs Haven't Caused U.S. Inflation to Soar. Have you looked at the M2 money supply, Megan? To be fair, the latest update was from August 21st of 2025. Now, economists in fiat-thinking circles have said that while the inflation wouldn't be necessarily guaranteed, prices would end up surging within the last year. You have to look at RAM and GPU prices due to AI, plus the tariffs. And it doesn't look like we'll be winning the AI race. The Chinese will be sadly winning the AI race. Most Americans are gonna have a hissy fit with me. Personally speaking, I do not care. I've been paying attention to this a bit, but I've just been focusing on what I need to do. Anyway, there's this organization, the CEA. Their analysis found prices of imported goods were declining. How much bullspit is that? I did not see that throughout the year, but that is how tariffs are supposed to work in theory. They never work in practice. This was 9% average being seen due to the import rates, lower than the estimates that were reported, but there is nothing more important here. It's just a whole bunch of gobbledygook that I don't even trust anymore. Anyway, fifth one coming from marketplace.org. This is by Justin Ho, saying, here's why tariffs haven't caused prices to rise much, despite inflation worries. It doesn't talk about tariffs really, though inflation was supposed to be at 2%. It really isn't when we take a look at some other factors that cause the CPI to spike. Apparel and furniture were seeing higher prices, though apparently this was not too bad. There was in fact a 1-year truce to hopefully iron things out because, yeah, that's not really good. Services tend to be where the money will be spent, not goods as of right now. Part of that, of course, had to do with fears of the tariffs by a lot of different people, not just Democrats, but Republicans and a bunch of voluntarists. Some voluntarists have no idea what they're talking about, though. A lot of people who are in a mainstream political party that is a household name, they probably don't know much because they are only stuck to like one side of the argument. You want multiple sides of the argument, multiple political affiliations with it. That's just how I've done it for a while. Anyway, the labor market seems to be affected more by this than services. I mean, have you seen how many jobs are being replaced by AI because of politicized work? Politics is just basically the excuse because companies had to downsize due to employees becoming more expensive and plus working from home actually being much, much, much better. But we have the final article of today, which is from Morningstar. Jeff Ferry writes, Americans' affordability crisis isn't the tariffs' fault. It's something much, much deeper. He said that there were 20% increases seen in consumer prices. This is from December 6th of 2025. Prices of everyday life are rising faster despite slightly higher prices on some goods. It was said that the affordability plans were a con job and a hoax. And affordability, while there are some flaws with it, it's not really a scam, as would say. When looking at the data, though, something deeper was afoot. And from the looks of things, they were becoming higher in price due to issues with structure. It is implied fractional reserve banking is the reason for it. Now, we do have a failing industry in America where the workforce is not aligning with modern society. This is the same with energy and regions. That's just not aligning at all. And in fact, you can't even get a job in New York City because jobs are unavailable due to bad payment. You have to take a job for what you can learn, not what you can make. You have to do this the Spirko way. Unfortunately for me, the Spirko way is kind of hard to do at this moment. Now, I've been pushed to doing any sort of trade like electrician, plumbing, or welding. I have a health issue that literally prevents me from doing any of that. And I've done some research on good jobs for those with autism. Unfortunately, this is not a good idea. But anyway, the solution to fix all of this nonsense is to raise incomes and expand higher paying work access. You have to address supply scarcity where it hurts the most. For example, you have to do electrical power, which can be done with an electrician. More power capacity helps in terms of AI, which will eat up energy big time. But also, for some reason, agriculture is unaffected since the tariff was removed, which was a bad idea. Now, let's give you my opinion based upon what I've read on both sides. Using critical thinking, it's unlikely that the tariffs were that bad to begin with. Jobs are not paying what they should be right now, as people are being replaced by others using AI tools. Learning AI will be a requirement for job security in the future, if job security would end up existing soon. Actually, now that I think about it, I do have something I'll be bringing up here. It's a 4chan post. Because, of course, 4chan seems to be somewhat trustworthy. And after a moment, I have found it. This is a post from January 5th of 2013, which is insane. This was at 03:32 hours from the time the screen cap was taken. And this is from an anonymous poster saying, quote, "There will be no collapse the way some people think of it. It's not going to be like the movie Dawn of the Dead or whatever, where one day suddenly poo-poo hits the fan and prices skyrocket and everyone begins to riot and the SS comes marching down the street to game end everyone. There will be no happening. It's far more insidious than that. Read the poem The Hollow Men by T.S. Eliot, and you'll understand. You'll notice that every day, simple things will become a little more expensive. Everyone's homes and apartments will start to get smaller. Your work hours will get longer, but your pay will decrease. You'll see family and friends less, and find that in time you care less about them. Every day, you'll find yourself lowering your standards for everything: work, food, relationships, etc. Job security will no longer exist as a concept. You'll notice houses and apartments shrinking. People will start hanging onto clothing longer and longer. Less people will get married. Even less will have children. People will engross themselves in technological distractions and fantasy while never truly experiencing the real world. Whatever dream people used to have about what their lives were going to be will become for them a distant memory. The only thing left for them will be the reality of their debt and their poverty, and every minute of every day they will be told, "You are stupid, ugly, and weak, but together we are free, prosperous, and safe." That is the collapse, the reduction of the American man into a feudal serf, incapable of feeling love or hate, incapable of seeing the pitiful nature of his situation for what it is, or recognizing his own self-worth. If you think about that for a second, this all makes sense. Generation Z, my generation, is starting to notice it. We've already been noticing it. We do say, however, the boomers goofed us over. I think I talked about this in a bonus segment on a previous episode. That's the Wavelake version, or rather Podcast 2.0. I do Wavelake because I just host my podcast on Wavelake. But that said, things seem to be a little strange if you think about that. But we've got more. Oh, there is certainly more. Now, if AI is to be used for enhancements and not replacement, not automation, that's okay. I personally use AI as part of the process of making cover art and thumbnails for some videos on my channel, and formerly Cöcülës Reddit readings, of which, by the way, that channel no longer exists. And Sokyo was like, "I'm not even working on that channel anymore, so go ahead and get rid of it." I got rid of the channel because we did not need it. I do this as references only. I am willing to change things once a human does the art, and does a better job with the AI-generated reference than the actual AI-generated stuff itself, though I'm actually pretty decent when it comes to prompting. Now, the prices on this type of thing, especially RAM, have been higher due to the AI and tariff situation that didn't do all that great. No wonder people are saying AI is a bubble, when, as I said, Mark Moss disproves AI as a bubble with the US dollar and the bonds thereof. AI is being used as a scapegoat because a lot of people don't like that AI is being more professional than even humans, who apparently have personal biases. I may have my personal biases, but do I care about that? I don't. I try to prove this out big time. Now, saving money means you cannot share your profits with investors. You have to share them with employees, like what Henry Ford did when he started Ford. You may want to take a look at a lawsuit called Dodge v. Ford. This is the reason why we're seeing companies give profits to their investors. All of them. I learned about this a day before recording the original version of this episode, of which I scrapped. And the Dodge brothers, they apparently were able to use a lot of trickery in order to get Ford to share profits with investors. I hope that precedent gets broken. Now, one last point I want to make. From the research I had done on this, AI is causing price spikes, and the tariffs were apparently just a cover-up. There was a RAM fab that stopped producing for the consumer market intentionally. I call for more RAM fabs to be made so things will become better priced for consumers. The motive is cloud computing. Now, you may have heard the saying, "You will own nothing and you will be happy." Well, it's only for those who actually call for it. GeForce Now has a 100-hour limit for any subscription. That's garbage. This is cloud computing. They want you to get this specialized piece of hardware to connect to their servers so you can have a VM. This is stupid. That's intentional. This is incompetence. Actually, nay. It's said that you never attribute to malice what you can attribute to incompetence. But this is malicious. Supposedly, AI is a bubble. A lot of anti-AI people will tell you this. Now, I get some of the concerns for AI. I really do. However, you need to be good at AI prompt engineering or doing things using AI, not necessarily automation, but you do want AI enhancements, or rather, AI augmentation. Augmentation is good, but so much as automation, I wouldn't want to be automated. But all of our jobs are apparently being automated in the future from the research I had done. And by the way, we're already in a recession right now. It's a inflationary recession, which will turn into an inflationary depression, and then we're going to war. This has happened every single time. 2008, we saw war in 2008. We saw war from the 1929 stock market crash, and so on and so forth. But that said, I am out of time for today's episode. And actually, speaking of, each episode is released every Wednesday, without scheduling conflicts if there are any, at 4 p.m. Pacific Time. You can listen to this podcast on Wavelake, YouTube, and any other Podcast 2.0 player, such as Podverse, Fountain, AntennaPod, and many more. If you are on the YouTube side, you can copy the RSS feed from Wavelake, which will be in the show notes below, and paste it to a player that doesn't support the 2.0 standard. I personally listen not on any podcast service. No, I listen on a music player, of all things, that is local. I do all this myself. But that said, I'm going to go ahead and just end this episode here. Thank you, and good night.